And let's move on into our last discussion we're going to have on the podcast. And I have the pleasure of welcoming in a friend of ours here on the podcast, one of our patrons, Matt, calling in. Matt, how you doing on this wonderful Sunday that we are recording the podcast on today?
Good. It's, football's just about here, so that's exciting.
Yeah, we finally had what do they call it? Week 0 this past week in college football with that Florida-Miami game. But we're going to take a look at, and before we get into the Big Ten, make sure patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast, especially if you want to be like Matt and join us on a podcast of your choosing. Go and check out that link down below. But we're going to look at the Big Ten. Whenever we have you on, Matt, it's always, I love it because I get my kind of Big Ten fix through your Patreon segments, and it's no different here. We're going to be talking about the Big Ten West, and they have obviously the most questions because it's for the first time in a long time, anyone except for my Illinois Fighting Illini can probably win this side of the conference, and then it's like, okay, who are you going to go up against, Ohio State or Michigan on the other side? So we're going to decide today, or try to decide today, who the hell is going to win the Big Ten West. And usually I ask you where it's like, okay, who's the first team you want to bring up? But I'm actually going to throw a team at you, and that is going to be the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And the reason why I am throwing them at you is because I have a feeling that people are just weirdly high on Nebraska this year. Like, yes, I get it, Scott Frost's second year. Like, that to me is like, okay, it's only his second year. You've also got Adrian Martinez, who's coming in to his sophomore year. Should people be as high on the Cornhuskers to win this division? And do you even see Nebraska as a viable option to win the Big Ten West?
I think I'm kind of with you in just that they seem to be a little overhyped, at least in the here and now, based on what we know. Last year they got off to a rough start. I think 0-5, 0-6 before they even got their first win on the board. And they did close. I mean, I think part of the reason for the hype is that they did close the season out fairly well. I think they got up to 4 wins, and you saw a lot of promise, especially from Martinez, who arguably is going to be, that could be said to be the best returning quarterback in the Big Ten, but by some people. So you have those things going for them, but I mean, it just seems like a big jump for them to be ranked following last year. I mean, I get the reason for optimism, but to basically say already that they're at that level seems to me to be a little quick to say that.
Yeah, and I mean, looking to fact check you, because you were right. They went 0-6 to start last year, and then finished off with a 4-8 record. So what, they went 4-2 the rest of the way. And the only thing I can see that's a benefit for Nebraska is maybe their schedule, where it's like, okay, you've got to play Iowa, you got to play Wisconsin, you have to play Northwestern. Good thing about those 3 games, all of them are going to be in Lincoln, Nebraska. Then on top of it, you're going to play Ohio State, but at least you get Ohio State at home compared to Ohio State in Columbus. So there's even a part of me that's like, Colorado, who they're going to play on the road, is not the same Colorado team that beat them last year. Like, they've got their wide receiver, Lavishka, I think is his name. But besides that, I don't think Colorado is going to be that special this year. Then you've got Northern. Could they upset Nebraska? Maybe. But Northern Illinois going into Lincoln, you're expecting that to be a Cornhusker win. Then your other road games are Illinois. You should win that one. Minnesota, who could be down this year. Purdue, who could be down this year. And then Maryland. Is there a team in your mind that you're like, you know what, coming into this is the team I was looking for to be the front runner for the West?
I think, I mean, as open as it is, and I think everyone would agree it is fairly open. I think maybe the most consensus has to be around Iowa, and I think a lot of that just has to come from, the consistency with their program, the return of Nate Stanley, the presence of Epinesa up front. Like, they just have a lot of good pieces that are back and a lot of history to back up that they can, play at a high level, that I think they're maybe the safest bet. And obviously, Wisconsin was kind of running the West for the most part for the last 5+ years, but I don't know that I'd put them up front just because I think there's too many questions at quarterback with them, and knowing what they're going to get out of that position to vault them to the top. So I think right now you might say Iowa kind of by default, and just because of their success over the last couple of years, whereas a lot of these teams that are entering the mix are kind of up-and-comers in Minnesota, Purdue, and Nebraska with their, new head coaches, all of those coaches being in year 3 or less of their regime. So I think that's why it makes it hard for you to pick any of them.
Yeah, almost looking at the two that you did mention with Iowa and Wisconsin, I think they're interesting because they what's good about offensively, what's good about one is not so good about the other. Where you mentioned, Wisconsin, they did, by the way, today announce that it's going to be, I'm going to say his last name wrong. I think it's Jack Cohen, the junior quarterback who's been with them for the last 2 seasons. It's just Jack Coan. Is going to be the starter for Wisconsin, but it's Nate Stanley, he's solid, coming back as a senior. You've got a first-year starter in Jack, the junior. But then it's you look at it, the biggest flaw for the Hawkeyes offensively is the run game. But then you look at Wisconsin, and it's we're sitting pat with Jonathan Taylor at the running back position. And to me, the big thing that I look at, too, is I'm a schedule junkie. And the one question that I will ask you, particularly when it comes to Iowa and Wisconsin, is how much of a benefit is it going to be for Wisconsin to, yes, they have to play Nebraska on the road, but they get Iowa at home. They get Northwestern at home. They also get Michigan at home on their schedule, whereas you've got Iowa, they got to go to Nebraska. They have to go to Wisconsin. They have to go to Northwestern, and then they have to go to Ann Arbor as well. Do you think those schedules are going to maybe favor the Badgers more so than it favors the Hawkeyes?
I think in terms of if you're staying in the West games, maybe yes, as you laid it out. But I think the biggest thing to look at with Wisconsin's schedule is their crossover games. They get Michigan, Michigan State, and Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
So three top 20 teams, whereas Iowa gets Penn State at home. Where are the other ones?
What is it?
Michigan.
And then I think that's it? No, they should have. No, they don't.
No.
Oh, no, Rutgers.
Oh, they get Rutgers.
Rutgers. I completely forget they're a part of the Big Ten, let's be honest.
Right. So, I mean, in the crossover games, I think there's no doubt that Wisconsin has the hardest path there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think maybe in the grand scheme, maybe it evens out when you take into account the whole deal. But I think Wisconsin, definitely of any team in the West, has by far the toughest crossover matchups.
Yeah, and I mean, even if we pull Northwestern into it, because the crossover games, you're right, are interesting, whereas Northwestern has Ohio State, Indiana, Ohio State at home, Indiana on the road, and then Michigan State at home. So not the easiest. If you're looking for maybe the easiest, let's see Nebraska. I didn't even look at their crossover games. Do they have the easiest crossovers? They've got Ohio State, they have Indiana, and Maryland. So, I mean, Indiana's always a rough one because, they can play anybody tough any given weekend, especially if that game is at Indiana. But, I mean, Wisconsin may have the toughest one, going to Ohio State, having to play Michigan State and Michigan, and Northwestern, who we didn't even talk about. I'll throw them out. I kind of almost feel bad, but I don't, because I'm an Illinois fan, and I'm not afraid to let my orange and blue out when talking about Northwestern. I almost feel like they're an afterthought to me to win this side of the division, because I just, don't think they're going to be as good of a team as they were. Plus, on top of those crossover games of Michigan State, Ohio State, and Indiana, they have to go to Wisconsin and to Nebraska. In your mind, is it a three, like, we're throwing out a lot of teams and everyone can say, well, yeah, any team can win it. But realistically, like, is it a 3-dog race between Nebraska, Wisconsin, and Iowa? Is it a 2-dog race? Or is it honestly anything is possible, and even Northwestern could overcome their road games and their crossover games to win the division?
I think it's anything is possible, to be honest. I mean, when you even go back to last year, I mean, I guess obviously last year's a little. Well, yeah, it's much different. Wisconsin was supposed to be the front runner and run away with the division, and here Northwestern kind of came out of nowhere and they took it. You're right. I think I myself, I didn't bring them up, discredited them a little bit, but I think when you look back at what they were able to do last year, I mean, they snuck by in some of the games they really shouldn't have. It took a pretty much a miracle to win at home against what was a winless Nebraska at the time.
Mm-hmm.
They barely snuck by Rutgers on the road. When it comes down to it, it just seems like there was too much, I don't want to say luck, but the ball bounced their way too many times for that to repeat this year for them. But, I mean, all credit to Northwestern. They've been such a consistent program under Fitzgerald. You can usually expect 7-8 wins in a bowl game from them. So I wouldn't discount that they're going to probably do that. I don't know that they're really in the running for it again this year, though. It just seems like there's now too many other teams that are going to be competitive for them to be the one that gets out of that bundle. But I think anything's possible. I mean, Minnesota, you talk about another team that had a strong finish to the year last year, to go into Wisconsin and win like they did, and I think they were able to win their bowl game too, if I remember right. They closed out the season well, and obviously Fleck has been getting some good recruiting classes. They could be a surprise team. Obviously, everyone's already kind of dubbed Nebraska as a surprise team. Purdue's an interesting one, too, because now they're in year 3 of Braum, and there's reason for optimism. I just don't know if they make that jump yet, but it also wouldn't surprise me if they did. So I don't know. I at the end of the day, the likely case is that it ends up being Iowa or Wisconsin, I think. Yeah. But I really do think any number of games go one way or the other, it really impacts the end result here.
And to give the Minnesota side of things, you were right. They started out 3-0, then they lost their next 4, went to 3-4, and then finished 3-2 the rest of the way. So they were 6-6, won their bowl game over the Yellow Jackets of Georgia Tech to go 7-6. The question I was going to ask you that I had lined up before you brought up Minnesota and Purdue was, I sadly can't talk about my team. I would love to be able to sit here and say that Lovie Smith and the Fighting Illini are finally going to get it done, that Ricky Smalling and this wide receiver core are going to do great things. It doesn't matter that our top defensive back recruit tore his ACL. We're going to do good things. I wish I could say that, though I can't. I want to hear from you, though, because if you're new to the podcast, Matt is a big Purdue Boilermakers fan, and you mentioned Jeff Braum, head coach. Give me you can either, depending on how your mind works, if you want to give me a realistic fan expression, or if you want to go full Purdue fan, what's going into your mind, A, about this season for Purdue, so a mini Purdue preview from Matt, but also realistically, like, can Purdue surprise people and win the Big Ten West?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that the biggest things going into the year that are on my mind are one, the offensive line. That's kind of been a
Hmm.
patch job. They lost a lot of guys from last year, and there's been a lot of questions in training camp as to how that end will hold up.
Right now, you'll
Um,
probably have about three positions that'll be freshman and sophomore.
yeah, exactly. But I mean, some people at face value, they see that Purdue lost their starting quarterback David Blau to graduation, but what they might not realize is that Purdue returns a starter from the prior year, Elijah Sindelar, who actually closed out the last 4 games on a torn ACL in 2017 and played really well. So that you're essentially replacing a starter with another starter who actually probably has a higher NFL draft stock than the previous quarterback. So I feel good there. Their wide receivers, I mean, when you have a guy, Rondale Moore, in your team, that's a pretty darn good place to start. Desmond Howard actually picked him to win the Heisman this year, which I doubt would happen, but just for him to be getting that recognition tells you all you need to know about him. And they also got, I think, 3 or 4 other 4-star wide receivers coming in, so they're really stacking the wide receivers, even though they might be young on that end. So, but with that, I mean, if the line can't hold up, that's gonna obviously derail a lot of the offensive production. So we'll see how that goes. That's a huge question. And then the other big question is just the defense. In year one of the Brom era, the defense was good based on what was left with the team. A lot of people graduated, and last year they took a significant step back. This year, they do return basically their best players, but they're going to be filling in a lot of new positions with what was a good recruiting class. So how quickly do you adapt to some of the corner and safety positions and even up front on the D-line? So those are some of the big things. So, I mean, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of uncertainty. It's a tough schedule. Purdue, I think, is one of 4 teams that plays 11 Power 5 conference games on their schedule. And the only non-Power Conference game is a trip to Nevada on this upcoming Friday. So that's not a cakewalk by any means. So it's going to be tough. I mean, I think realistically, if Purdue were to win 7 games, is kind of where I'm thinking, which is it's improvement based on the 2 6-6 years. The last 2 years, it might not be the jump that some people are hoping for, but I think really just for this ball to get rolling, I think they're going to need a year to get under these young guys' belts. And I think even schedule-wise, if it eases up into the following year, that's when you might see a bigger jump.
I mean, it sounds great to be able to, like you said, oh man, 7 wins. And I just thought to myself, I was like, so the Illini, are we going to win 4 games, 5 games, maybe 6 games? Like, it must feel great. I was thinking in my head to have a team that's like, man, 7 wins sounds really good. And also you bring up Sindelar. I know Sindelar only because that year he was a starter. I don't remember if he got hurt in that game or if he started and then got pulled. But against Illinois, he went 2 for 2 with a touchdown in that game. And I was like, how the hell did he score a touchdown on us? Because that was at the time of the year where it's like, are they going to start this quarterback or the other quarterback? So it's like you bring up Sindelar, and it kind of brought back nightmares in my head. But to kind of put a kibosh on all this, I'll go first with this because my answer is kind of easy when it comes to just bottom line, who's going to win the Big Ten West. I think it's going to be Iowa, only because to me they're the better team on paper. Yes, they've got some road games like Michigan, Wisconsin, Northwestern, Nebraska that it's like you got to overcome a lot of road games to get where you want to go. But I think they have the pass rushing to do it. They have the quarterback to do it. The only question is, how's the run game going to be this year? So if I had to place my bet, I'm going to pick Iowa to win the Big Ten West. If you had to pick right now, Matt, who's your pick to be the Big Ten West winner at the end of the year?
I think I'm going to follow suit with you and go with Iowa. They have, I think, the least amount of uncertainty, or I could make that two negatives. They have the most certainty and most clarity across the board going into the year, I think. And you're right, they do have a tough schedule the more I look at it, but I just think that they have the veteran presence and the past success to suggest that they can overcome some of that, and that they'll be there in the thick of things till the end. I mean, even if it comes down to that Iowa-Nebraska game at the end of the year, which it very well could, you just talk about having the experience of those sorts of games that Iowa would have and Nebraska might not yet have. I mean, I look at it and I think Nebraska, the more I look at it, their schedule is super favorable, actually, and that might give them a chance. But I just think there's going to be too much inconsistency from them yet, even though they might make a big jump. I don't think they can make that big a jump, and you'll still see inconsistency there. So I'm going to go with Iowa.
And then I'm going to ask you a real dumb question, or it's going to sound like a dumb question. Which team from the West gives the West the best chance to beat the East in the Big Ten title game? Is it just Nebraska? Is Iowa the only team that has a chance to beat a Michigan, beat an Ohio State in the Big Ten title game? Or could a team like Wisconsin, a team like Nebraska, win the West and upset either the Buckeyes or the Wolverines in Indianapolis?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's probably, I guess my answer is going to be the same. I think it's Iowa, just because if they're good enough to have the level of success we think they can, then they should be in a place where they can compete with that East side winner.
Mm-hmm.
I just think Wisconsin in terms of running game and their line can match anyone, but it's just too many questions with their quarterback, and they pretty much showed last year with their inconsistent quarterback play how much that can derail the sort of seasons they're used to. So I want to say Iowa for that reason, I think.
Yeah, I'm kind of sitting in the same boat and I say it's a dumb question because it's like, I kind of feel like it's an easy one where it's like, duh, it's Iowa. Iowa's the one that is going to be the team that has the best chance to beat the Big Ten East. I don't even know if the West win. In my predictions, I picked Iowa to beat Michigan, but in my mind, I don't realistically know if the West is going to win that game. But it's like, I'll say that, and then I'll think back to the year where it was like if the Ohio State Buckeyes would have won, they would have been in the playoff, but they lost to the West. I want to say that was Wisconsin that year. You guys can fact check me on that. But Matt, I want to thank you for being on the podcast yet again. It's always a great time having you on. And if you guys want to be like Matt, make sure to check out patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast. That link is down below. Again, YouTube people, I apologize for being just audio this week. Didn't want to deal with the issues with the camera. Hopefully we can get that lens resolved, get a new one in here so I don't have to make that excuse and I can have video for you guys each and every week. Want to thank you guys for this. Actually, why am I doing this? Man, I completely forgot. I got one more segment to do. I got to make my pick. So make sure to check out Patreon. I was ready to go into my spiel, but I am going to go on. Matt, it was great to have you on, and I can't wait to have you on in September for your September Patreon segment.
Yeah, thank you so much. Let's enjoy football as it comes to us now.